Start. Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison. I'll be your host tonight. I am the Assistant Director of NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness, North Carolina, and I'm glad you are here. Thursdays with NAMI is our way of having real conversations, just sitting down, talking about what's real, and building conversations, building community on the topic of mental health. Tonight's guest is a talented writer and educator whom I found completely by accident while scrolling LinkedIn. Her profile is thoughtful, complete with a rainbow banner and a wall of inspiring posts about mental health and empowerment. I was very jazzed and inspired by her content, and I reached out to her and she was nice enough to say, yes, I will share my story and spend an evening with you on Thursdays with NAMI. Fatin Abdal-Sabur, I hope I said your last name correctly.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
Okay, I figured it had a flow like, I kept thinking of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Similar.
Yeah. Fatin is a volunteer with NAMI Maryland and her local affiliate in Prince George's County. She has 17 years of experience as a writer and educator. Her online presence is sleek and professional. Looking at her website, you wouldn't guess that she has struggled with a mental health condition, but she has, like many of us. We'll be hearing that story in just a moment. As usual, the first part of our show will be an interview with our guest. Partway through, we'll show a video of the week, and then we'll spend time taking questions from you, members of our virtual studio audience, live and on Facebook. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Use Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Block Grant Fund. We're very grateful to them. They've just been wonderful to us, and they really do care about making things better for folks with mental health conditions in our state. All right, without further ado, welcome, Fatin.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we always like to know the background of our guests. Maybe you can tell us your story in a nutshell.
Oh, wow. This is not a job interview, but for some reason I'm having job interview flashes because that's always the first question and it's always so difficult to answer. But you kind of hit on the major points. Teaching, writing. I've been a copywriter for the past 3 years. After I left my teaching job, I used to be a high school teacher for 5 years, from 2015 to 2020 here in Maryland. And it was extremely stressful, which is a total understatement to describe it that way. And I was really, really unhappy towards the end. And it just got really bad. And you know, this is what we're here to talk about. That's what led to my first mental breakdown, which was the first hospitalization after that. So that was, I want to say 2018. So that wasn't like the first time that, like I knew that I had bipolar before then, but that was the first time that it became like flashing 911 emergency crisis. So,
yeah, I hear that a lot, that there's having a and managing it in a getting by way, and then there's that moment where it's in your, it just becomes something, the thing that you can't ignore and the thing that you need to address. And then after that, at least for me and a lot of folks I've interviewed, life becomes learning that recovery process and learning to manage it.
Right.
Yeah. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry. That's something I know we're going to talk about introversion later, which I'm really excited because I have like a ton of fairly strong opinions about that stuff. But part of it is the natural cadence of conversation gets a little difficult sometimes. But yeah, go ahead, Peg. You can go into the next question.
Okay. So we'll start with the basics. What is bipolar disorder and how does it look in your life?
Yeah. I had a really amazing psychiatrist in Laurel, Maryland, where I used to live. I lived there for 10 years. I do not live there anymore. And her name, I think I can say her name. She's a public person. Her name is Dr. Jemima Cancan. And anybody who's in the Baltimore, Maryland area, please look her up, because seriously, she is the best psychiatrist that I've ever had in my life. And the one who not only diagnosed my bipolar, she also told me about NAMI. And here we are, the rest is history, right? So bipolar disorder, I have bipolar 2. There's bipolar number 1 and bipolar number 2. Bipolar number 1 is more prone, it's a mood disorder, which means that it makes it very hard to stabilize your moods. Bipolar 1 is more prone to mania, and bipolar 2 is more prone to depression. And I don't really like to describe it this way, but this is like a whole other interview where we could talk about this. But sometimes people, not me, describe bipolar 2 as a little milder. And I don't really like to use that language when talking about number 1 and number 2, because it's not worse or better, it's just different, So yeah, Dr. Jemima Kingham, she gave this wonderful metaphor, and I wish I could describe it now, but this was a long time ago, so I probably don't remember it. But it was sort of like, she helped me figure out, and she helped me pinpoint the different periods of my life where I was cycling. In bipolar, there's something called rapid cycling. And I forget the timeline. There's like specific timelines. It's like, you are depressed if you are having a depressive episode if you felt depressed for 2 to 4 weeks. Like it's very regimented and numbered like that. But I just looked to the past before I was medicated and before I'd been diagnosed. And one of the symptoms of mania for me was extreme irritability, extreme anger. And like, I like to eat. Everybody likes to eat. I thought I was just hangry all the time. You know that saying, I'm hangry, Hangry. I was like, oh, I'm just hangry. But then later, when I talked to Dr. Kingham and did some of my own research, it was like, no, I was manic, And to this day, even though I, have struggled, like many of us who have a mental illness have, with finding the right medication, even to this day, I mean, there's no medication that can like totally take away your bipolar symptoms. If you're stressed, I don't know, stress is the best thing I can think of, then those manic episodes are going to come out. So you just have to deal with it.
I agree. It does seem like whatever recovery treatment or practice we have that works, when stress increases and the pressure is on in life, though the efficacy of whatever it is goes way down. Yeah.
Exactly.
So quick
and I'm sorry, Peg. I would love to give an example of the way that mania shows up in my life. Now, having been a public school teacher for 5 years, whether you're a morning person or a night person, I had always thought I was a night owl. And I love film. So I would stay up until like 3 a.m. watching TCM. That was like my happy place. I started high school teaching, and whether you want to or not, you will become a morning person. I was at school sometimes at 6:30 in the morning. I was at the gym at 4:00 in the morning in order to get to school at 6:30 in the morning. So a few months ago, I think it was over the summer, it was 9 p.m. I'm 44 years old. I'm a middle-aged person. Like 9 p.m., we are in bed with our jammies on, It was 9 p.m. I was like, I'm feeling pretty good. I'm going to jump in the car and drive to Silver Spring to the AFI theater and watch a movie. Number one, I never have energy at that time of night. I am spent 99% of the time. Number two, I don't like to drive here in Maryland because the drivers are crazy. But that's another conversation too. Number three, I was out until midnight, then came home, slept a few hours, and I was ready to go the next day. And that's another symptom of mania that I don't know if a lot of people are aware of. And Dr. Kankam taught me about this too. It's called the decreased need for sleep.
Mm,
So I remember when I was living in Ramallah in Palestine,
wow.
and I would stay up until 3 o'clock in the morning watching TV, just kind of contemplating my existence, right? And sleep for a few hours and then get up at 7 o'clock the next morning and go to the university and teach my classes. And it was like nothing was wrong. And that, in retrospect, was like a sign. That was a manic episode.
Mm, okay. And you,
Yep.
of course, experienced the hypomania, not the full blown, but a little more
Right.
low grade.
Right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. Because as far as I know with bipolar one, mania is longer, it's more intense, and it can be really dangerous, and it can be life-threatening. Because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a mental health expert, so please do your own research. But I think there's like a psychosis piece to it. But
Hmm.
again, everybody, please do your own research.
Hmm. Yeah, always
Yeah.
good advice. So, when did you first experience the signs and symptoms of bipolar disorder?
Oh, well, I have had some form of depression and mental health challenges since I was 17. Now, we could go back and talk about like childhood trauma and all that stuff, but as far as my memory started when I was 17. And I remember being in high school, and I was like a very smart, very high achieving student.
Mm,
Was always a good writer. And I remember I got like, I don't know, like a B minus or something on a paper. And for whatever reason, somebody who's used to getting A's and then you get a B minus, it was like totally like made me depressed.
uh,
And that was also, so I was very depressed. I started seeing a therapist. And that was also my first experience with what I'm going to call SI, all right, which stands for suicidal ideation. And I'll tell the folks who are listening 2 reasons why I like SI. And I
mhm.
never knew about calling this SI before my therapist. My DBT, dialectical behavior therapist, taught me about it. English is a very impatient language. So saying
Hmm.
SI is like just get straight to the point. And the other reason I like it is because it kind of takes the edge off, because it's a hard word to keep saying over and over. So that's what I'm gonna say, SI. So
I
my first
support that.
experience, yes, right? Isn't that great? Yeah, I was 17, started seeing a therapist, started feeling depressed, got on, antidepressants, and just had a long, excuse me, bumpy history with medical professionals. I think at one point I had a psychiatrist who diagnosed me with seasonal affective disorder,
Mm,
which for anybody who knows me, I'm super into astrology. I'm a Sagittarius. I was born in December. I love winter. Winter doesn't do anything to me
mm,
negatively, mentally. If anything, I have reverse. It's it's
yes,
like a laugh to keep from crying situation. So I'll direct this to myself, but I like to say that I have reverse seasonal affective disorder because, and maybe this is true. I don't know if this is a thing or not, because I was so depressed last summer. Last summer was really bad. Long, long, long depressive episode, like 2 or 3 weeks.
mm,
And it was so hot and so humid in Maryland. And I'm the type of person who I love to be outdoors. I love nature. I love birds. I'm sorry. Like, I love you birds. I love you belted kingfishers and blue herons and red-winged blackbirds. But it's 90 degrees and 90% humidity. Like, I'm staying in my house in the air conditioning, you know? So yeah, that was difficult. But yeah, not until I met Dr. Kankam did I really learn what was going on.
Mm. Interesting, your comment about 2 or 3 weeks of feeling terrible, not doing the things that you normally love, like going outside
Yes.
and checking out those beautiful birds.
Yes.
That resonates with me a lot. And that's one of those classic symptoms.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
so you describe yourself as a hardcore introvert. I love that phrase.
Yes.
What does that mean? How does that intersect with bipolar disorder?
I think that discovering introversion and kind of embracing that as part of my identity has been one of the most illuminating and powerful occurrences of my life. Because for years, I just thought that I was quirky or
Mhm.
weird or just Fatine doing her own weird little thing, you know, canceling plans at the last minute, you know, not wanting to go to parties because people just want to make small talk, you know, going to a party and finding that one person and having like a super intense conversation with them to the point where it gets awkward and I'm making them uncomfortable. And then they're like, I'm gonna go get another glass of wine. I'll be right back. And you know, that's the poof, that's the end of them.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So oh gosh, there's so much to say. But the thing that I think is in terms of the intersection between introversion and mental health and things like that. I used to be um, very involved in Facebook groups for introverts.
Mhm.
And it was sort of like a double-edged sword because on one hand, it felt really good to be amongst your own, so to speak. But then on the other hand, it was really worrisome and kind of disappointing because there were a lot of angry people, there were a lot of bitter people, there were a lot of people who were like, and I just, for somebody with two master's degrees, it's sad to say that I just learned this word or what it actually means. People who have become misanthropes, you know, they just
Oh.
hate people, they hate society, right? And part of it I could understand. And then part of it with my mental health background and the research I've done was sort of like, you like, no, that's not introversion. You might have social anxiety. Like,
Sure.
please see a health professional. Please do your own research. But that's one of my diagnoses, social anxiety. So
Mm.
I like to think that I can recognize the signs, at least in myself. So that was always a big conflict for me, whether or not to participate in these groups, because I would read it and I would just get really like annoyed and upset and frankly worried for some of the people who were kind of hiding behind their introversion when in fact, you know, it goes much further than that,
Mhm.
in my opinion.
That makes a lot of sense. I think anytime
Yeah.
you find yourself in an echo chamber, it, you're going to get some negative energy. That's my experience.
Yeah.
So,
So it's very, very real for me. In a broader sense, I love to read about introversion. I love to talk to other introverts. Anybody out there, please, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. Please contact me if you want to talk about introverty type stuff, because I can talk about it all day. It's really interesting. And anybody who's sort of starting their journey, and she's super famous now. I don't know, you know, I'd be surprised if there was someone out there who hadn't heard of her yet, but Susan Cain, who's sort of like the, you know, my New Jersey, New York City people shout out, you know, when I call her the OG introvert, you guys are gonna know what I'm talking about. Okay. It's a sort of a if you know, you know type of thing. She's the
mm.
OG introvert, which is just a sort of slangy way of saying she's the original, she's old school. She's the one who sort of started the whole conversation. Yeah.
Well, great minds think alike. Our executive director, moments before you said that, mentioned her in the chat box, and her book, Quiet, The
Ah,
Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop
yes.
Talking.
You know, Peg, honestly, reading or having this conversation right now is inspiring me to go and reread that book because I don't want to sound like a broken record, but the word powerful and illuminating and sort of like a self-actualization type of thing as an introvert. And you read about the history in terms of Western culture and comparing it to Eastern culture. And it's just fascinating. And from a nerdy, because I'm a creative writer too, that I've had like a million different careers at this point. But even for my writer friends, folks I went to school with, in terms of people who write, especially nonfiction, the amount of research that went into that book is like mind blowing. So if you're into
Mhm.
that type of thing, just as a reader, a lover of literature, I would say definitely check her out. And her latest book, which is called Bittersweet, which is actually quite good, which is also quite good. I mean,
Mhm. I really should check her out. I'm an introvert, and
yeah,
I come from
yeah,
a long line of introverts. My mother was, she probably had introversion and social anxiety,
yeah,
as do I. And she would
yes,
get all excited and get the house in an impeccable state for company if we'd
yeah,
have my oldest brother to come home and stay or whatever. And then they'd
yeah.
come and she'd visit for a half hour, and then she'd go up to her room and have to take a nap.
Oh yeah. And I completely co-sign that because really, and this goes back to the question of how does it interact, introversion and bipolar, because in terms of coping skills, that
Mhm.
is the ticket. You have to develop self-awareness and you have to learn what works for you. And it's a
Mhm.
struggle, it's painful, it takes forever. You might come to the end of your life and never completely figure it out, but that's okay. And
Mhm.
to be more specific about it, somebody invites you to a party. Let's say you're an introvert, you get invited to a party. You're like, oh my God. Or no, this is more realistic. At first, you're like, yes, party, awesome. Let's say the party starts at 8:30. 7:30, you start thinking, I don't know if I feel like going to this party, but check this out. Go for half an hour, go for an hour, and then get the heck out of there. I've
Mhm.
I've done that before. And yeah, it may seem weird. People may ask, like, where are you going? You don't have to explain anything to them. Say, bye, it was great seeing you. I'm gonna go home. Period. End of
Mhm.
sentence.
That is a
So
great point. And if you're close with the
yeah.
host, they really appreciate that you made an
Oh
appearance
yeah.
and supported them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
there's so many memes about introversion. I'll tell one very, very, very briefly. There's a meme that says, um, I'll paraphrase it. Introverts are great people to be friends with because this is so bad, but I think it's hilarious. You can ignore me for 2 months and I won't even notice.
In fact, I'll be grateful.
Exactly. I think it's hilarious, but oh well. I can have a weird sense of humor sometimes.
I support that. A
Thank
comment
you.
from the chat. Introverts unite in our bedrooms all alone.
Yes. That's another good one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also wanted to pass along something from the chat. Sharon Renee Taylor said hello from Facebook.
Hi, Sharon. I miss you. I love you. My fellow Blackbirder. Blackbirders Week is coming up. Sharon, don't forget to RSVP by tomorrow, 17th.
It's a great name, the Blackbirders. I love that.
Yes, Blackbirders Week, everybody. Please Google it. We need everybody's support. Doesn't matter if you're a birder, doesn't matter what color you are. Blackbirders Week.
Right. And be careful in Central Park. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
all right. So uh shifting a little bit, you've had some serious thoughts and near misses with suicide. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, the first time was when I was 17. And, when it's such a weird, surreal experience when it's sort of hard to figure out which angle to take it, to approach it from. But, anybody who's been in an emergency room, at least the ones I've been in, and not for a mental health thing. Like, one time I had a family member who fell and she broke her tooth and she needed stitches. And why are we sitting in the ER for like 2 or 3 hours waiting to see a doctor? However, if you walk into an ER and you tell them, "Hi, my name is Fatin, and I'm having thoughts of hurting myself," it's like magic. You're back there, you're in the exam room, you have the nurses come in, they're doing your vitals, they're asking you questions. And I don't necessarily know what to think of that. I mean, I guess it's a good thing that they take it seriously, but
Mhm.
then that's a whole other topic of, how mental illness and how SI crises are handled in hospitals. Because I've been, they admit you, and I've been waiting in the ER in a bed for like 2 or 3 days before I get to see a psychiatrist. And like
Right.
for somebody who's having a mental health crisis anyway, it's like you're just laying there, and the bed is uncomfortable and you can't get any good channels on the TV and it's just like torture.
Mm.
So yeah, and it's so interesting, at least for me, how it's shown up, because the first time it was kind of like, and I didn't realize this until looking back on it in retrospect and also talking to doctors and things like that. But the first time, which was in 2018, I believe, it was kind of like a panic attack. You know,
Mm.
it's like you're sitting there and all of a sudden these overwhelming, totally overwhelming thoughts start coming into your head. And anybody who's had a panic attack, and I don't mean anxiety, we don't want to judge things, value judge things. You know what I mean? Things are different. They're not better or worse.
Mhm.
But having a panic attack is quite different from having anxiety. And again, I'm not a doctor, but from my experience, when you have a panic attack, like it's like a slow burn. But when it gets to a certain point, it's like, I have to get out of here. I have to move. I have to run. I have to leave. I don't know where I'm going, but where I am right now, I have to go. But for me, it was super scary because I knew that if I got up and moved from the spot I was in, I didn't know what I was going to do or what would have happened. So I'm just so happy that I had the presence of mind just to sit there and call people to come and help me and take me to the hospital. So that was
Mhm.
the first time. And the second time, which was in 2020, January of 2020, so almost exactly 3 years ago, um, was also pretty scary. And again, when you have a mental illness, it plays so many tricks on you. And this is the hardest thing to deal with, is that you have to learn, or I have had to learn, how to distinguish between what is an actual thought, like what is Fatine, what is Fatine's spirit, what is her soul, you know, versus what is the illness telling me, you
Mhm.
know? And the thing
Yes.
that was scary with the second time is that I wasn't able to make that distinction. It's like the intrusive thoughts and the thoughts that were tricking me into telling me that I shouldn't live anymore were
Mhm.
starting to kind of take over.
Mhm.
And that is like, you have to catch that at the right time, or
Mhm.
else a tragedy, let's be honest, or else a tragedy is going to happen. And
Sure.
thank you, God, for protecting me in that um, instance.
Mm. Well, I'm certainly grateful that you came through that and that the stars aligned in a way that you're safe and you're here with us tonight to help
Yeah.
people and keep doing what you do.
Yeah. Yeah. So one more thing I want to say about that, the second instance, in terms of not being able to distinguish the two levels of thought, the idea of, ending my life started to become logical. Started to be like, yeah, this is what I'm gonna do. Makes perfect sense. This is the only solution, you know? And that's when you know that you've lost control of your faculties. You're not able to tell the difference between what's a good, healthy idea and what's a totally dangerous, wrong, don't do it idea, you know?
Mhm.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So when we talked previously, you mentioned some things that people might want to be aware of before they go with inpatient care. The paper gown, the not seeing a doctor for a while. Can
Yeah.
you describe your experience from that view and what might be helpful to people to prepare or deal with that?
It's hard, Peg. And I don't know if there's even a way to make it easier or mitigate it or even to explain it because it's just not fun. And it's a double-edged sword because you know that you're safe. You know that you're in a place where, hopefully nothing's going to happen to you, either from by somebody else's hand or by your own hand. And that's the bottom line. That's why you're there. But in terms of how it works, and this is a whole conversation about like healthcare in America and insurance and hospitals and how the money is allocated and all of this stuff. Excuse me. But the best way I would describe it, and this is not an exaggeration, everybody, like, God forbid I should ever end up in jail or in
Mm,
prison. But I would say that's probably the closest thing that I will ever experience to being incarcerated. They take all your clothes, they give you a paper gown, they stick you in a room by yourself. It's a mattress on the floor. They give you a pillow and a blanket. They give you your food. You're sitting there, you know, sitting cross-legged on the floor, eating your Jello, out of a styrofoam cup. Which anybody who's been in the hospital for any reason knows that the food is like
mm,
gross, or sometimes depends on what facility you're in. But yeah, I mean, it's a safe place. Make sure you go to a hospital that has a good reputation, and it may make a difference, you know.
right.
But when it comes down, excuse me, when it comes down to it, it's an emergency, and you don't really have time to think, oh, do I want to go here? Do I want to go there? Just go.
Yeah.
Please, just go. Don't think about where you're going or what's going to happen to you. Just go, please.
Mm, wise words. Wise words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what role has NAMI played in your recovery?
Um, I really think that the real difference for me in terms of healing and recovery has been helping other people.
Yeah.
Because when you get into this, like, bogged down in your depression and your ugliness and your crap and your struggle and your pain and your suffering and all of that stuff, it really messes up your ability to be objective, you
Mhm,
know. And one of the skills I learned in DBT, dialectical behavior therapy,
mhm.
is a skill where there's several steps, but one of the steps is to kind of compare yourself to other people. And you have to be difficult with this because it's not so simple as saying like, well, that person over there uses a wheelchair and here I am and I have full use of all of my limbs, isn't that sad for them and great for me? Like, no, 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 no. That's not it at all. So I'm probably not going to do it justice. But I forgot where I forgot where I was going with that thought.
Was it
Peg, can
like
you
check the
remind me?
facts? You were on DBT
Oh,
and comparing yourself. I was wondering if you were going to go to check the facts or what. Yeah, I was
I
interested. I'm
forgot.
not. Oh, um, helping others and how that helped your recovery.
Ah, thank you, Peg. That's great. That's exactly it. So yeah, helping other people, maintaining your objectivity, being grateful, developing gratitude, wanting to serve, and like if anybody knows anything about my family, shout out to friends, family members who may be watching, love you. Like all of us were put on this earth to serve, in terms of our careers and the things that we've chosen to do professionally. And that to me is the key. And I have loved, and with the pandemic and everything, there haven't been as many opportunities, but I did recently do um, an interview for the volunteer newsletter with NAMI Baltimore, and I may be sharing that soon. So being a volunteer, participating in the organization, sharing my story, and honestly, one of the things that I have always wanted to do, and for anybody who is thinking about going into treatment for a mental health issue, after you, excuse me, after you get out of inpatient treatment, very often you'll be sent to something that's called a PHP, a partial hospitalization program. And it's kind
Yes.
of like a step down before you go back into normal life, the normal population. And I remember the first time that I was in the PHP, and there were these two women who came in, and I forget what it's called. And Peg, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about because there's so many different NAMI programs. I forget the name of each one, but it's two people who go into mental health facilities. They introduce themselves, they're representatives of NAMI, and they do a presentation, they take questions, and they're just there to kind of be examples of people who have, been able to live a functional life in terms of balancing the excuse me, sorry, balancing the challenges of having a mental illness. And it was so interesting. I remember there was one young woman who had experienced an extremely traumatic event. So I believe her diagnosis was PTSD. And I forget the other woman's diagnosis, but she was an older lady, maybe like in her 50s. And I will never forget what she said. She said, every 10 years, no matter what medication I've been on, I've had this condition for 30 years, no matter what medication they put me on, every 10 years, my medication stops working and I end up in the hospital. And that's happened to me at least 3 or 4 times in my life. And it just kind of, and a lot of this is very hard to deal with, but at least for me, bipolar 2 is chronic. I'm never getting rid of this condition. It's not like depression where you may be on antidepressants for a few weeks and, et cetera, et cetera. But my condition is chronic. I'll be dealing with it for the rest of my life. So it's really important to be realistic. And I've talked about this with my DBT therapist a lot of the time too, and it's like, I hope it never happens that I end up in the hospital again, but it's not off the table. I mean, you don't know how you're going to react to certain crises and certain stress levels and things like that,
Right.
So I have had to accept that, which has been very difficult.
I think that acceptance piece is one of the most important and one of the toughest. That's what gives you the foundation to move forward, but it's just very difficult. So you really, for
Yeah.
me, I had to sort of let go of certain pieces of my identity and accept that all my hopes and dreams and energy were now going to move in a different direction at a different pace with a different
Yes.
flow.
Yes. Yes.
So we have a question from the audience, and typically we wait until after our video of the week, but this relates pretty closely to what you've just been saying. This participant shares, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1 with psychosis a year and a half ago. I've been hospitalized twice. I'm now scared
Mhm.
about it happening again. I'm going to start seeing a psychiatrist soon. What suggestions do you recommend regarding the road to recovery and management from your experience?
Well, first of all, you should be very proud of yourself. And I am proud of you too for seeking help and to starting to see a psychiatrist, because for me, I don't really see how I could have survived, literally and figuratively, how I could have survived this experience without having medical professionals that I trusted and medical professionals who I knew were giving me helpful information. So I don't know if I have advice necessarily, but for me, it was also having good people around you, whether that's friends or family and people like that, because, I think that helps to kind of keep, or that has helped me to kind of stay balanced in a way and to maintain the right perspective.
Mhm.
And again, it goes back to what I was saying before. I knew that nothing bad was going to happen to me, you know? And I really had to focus on that in terms
Mhm.
of the experiences that I had when I was hospitalized. And yeah, it's scary. I've been very scared because it's like, and this actually goes with something you just mentioned, Peg, in terms of your personality and having to kind of take your hopes and dreams and things in a different direction. One of the most difficult things, and to the person who asked the question, hope this is something you can use. But one of the most difficult things for me has been sort of determining the difference between who's Fatin, like who am I at my core, my personality, my likes, my hopes, my interests, my plans for the future, my goals, versus, Fatin when she's healthy, who is she? And who is Fatin when she's sick? And
Mm.
those people are like two different people. And again, you have to develop awareness. How do you develop that awareness? By seeing a psychiatrist, taking
Mhm.
your medication, and getting into therapy. That's the trifecta. Has been for me. And it is that way for many people. So, yeah, just knowing how to tell the difference between who you are at your core, your true spirit, and who your mind kind of tries to trick you into thinking you are. And I'll
Mhm.
tell you right now, this is not going to stop my SI because it's chronic, because it's at this point it's like a physiological reaction. You know, you get the flu, you get a stomach ache, you get stressed out, and your eye twitches. Fatine gets stressed, and her mind starts going to her SI. You know,
Mhm.
but you have to develop that awareness in order to sort of reject those thoughts,
Mhm.
which is hard. It's not easy. It's something that you have to learn. It's something that you may never get the hang of 100%. And
Mhm.
honestly, it's something that I will probably never get the handle on 100%. But if you can, even if you just have flashes and moments of clarity, it's something that's good to reflect on.
Mhm.
I don't know if anybody out there journals. I'm a writer. That's how I experience the world. I write in my journal, or I use the notes app on my iPhone. Do
Mhm.
some reflection. Who am I? Who am I when I'm sick? Who am I when I'm healthy? And
Right.
see where it goes.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. And I
Yeah,
think for me, that identity piece and what's my core self? What we know, what's coming from the soul and what is
yeah,
the illness? For me, that inner critic makes it difficult. You know, I
yes,
like being someone who wants to do the best job I can. I like being professional, handling things a certain way,
yeah,
but that I don't have to be perfect. My inner critic tells me
yeah,
I'm always falling short and that I'll never be enough and I'll never, like, I can
yes.
never become the thing I actually might dream of becoming. Um,
Mm,
so that's,
yeah,
yeah. How much of that is illness? I have no idea.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
So we are at 7:46. I want to be sure that we can take questions, all the questions that might come in from people in the audience. We're going to show a quick video of the week, but first I want to thank our volunteers working diligently behind the scenes. Big shout out to Executive Director Gary Kreitz for always being here, and our App State intern, the wonderful MSW Caitlin Rita, MSW student Caitlin Rita. Thank you both for being here every week and for doing such a great job with the chat and just being supportive. And of course, thanks. Big shout out to Fatin for spending your evening with us. I am going to show a NAMI. This is from the national team. It's a nice video on bipolar disorder. So kind of a good summary of what we've been talking about in a quick minute. Let's go ahead and pull this up. The national team has a wonderful array of videos. They really do a fine job, very polished, very on point. Here we go.
Think back to an exciting moment in your life. Maybe it was your wedding, the birth of a child, or getting that dream job. What about the most depressing moment? The loss of a relationship, or death of someone important to you. Now, imagine fluctuating between these highs and lows, like riding a roller coaster that feels never-ending. Welcome to reality for over 10 million Americans living with bipolar disorder. Bipolar disorder is a chronic mental illness that causes dramatic shifts between manic highs and depressive lows, affecting a person's mood, energy, and ability to think clearly. An individual with bipolar can seek help and take control of their own mental wellness through a mixture of traditional medical treatment and holistic health activities. Free education, information, and support programs are available. You are not alone. We can help.
Okay, short and sweet. And those are messages that I hear all the time in NAMI classes and support groups. I learned I wasn't alone. I learned that there are resources available. I learned that there was hope. So that's a wonderful thing. And now we're gonna bring any more questions to the front. This is from Gary. When you have bipolar disorder, what is it like between active episodes?
Hmm. For me, that's a hard question to answer because for me, part of managing the condition has been exactly that, trying to tell the difference between, when I'm balanced or, when the scales have tipped too far in one direction or the other. And a lot of the time, it's not something that I realize in the moment. It's something that I realize in retrospect, which, you can think about it in two ways. I mean, at least I realized it. But then at the same time, I feel like if I had known closer to the moment where it was happening, that I might have been able to uh, like handle it or mitigate the negative effects. And again, everybody, I'm a huge proponent of therapy and especially of DBT. And again, everyone, please, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm just somebody with lived experience, but it really has changed my life. It has been a huge game changer,
Mhm.
DBT. And part of what I have learned in DBT is to kind of shorten that gap, you
Mm,
know? So whether I'm manic, like the story I told before about going to the movies at 9 o'clock at night and being out until midnight, which I literally never do. So I knew that something was a little off there. So having a manic episode and not realizing it until a month later and being like, yeah, I was acting really weird, you know?
Yeah.
So again, another thing is making sure you have a network, making sure you have friends and family around you. And that's a huge thing. That's a whole other conversation in terms of stigma, especially in the Black community, especially in faith communities, you know, where people kind of are used to giving their problems up to God, you know, and having God be the main kind of path to healing, you know.
Mhm.
So that's a beautiful thing in and of itself, but it can make managing a physical, mental, brain and chemical imbalance very difficult. So in order to answer Gary's question, the last thing that's coming to mind is having people around you who are willing to tell you the truth, you know?
Mhm.
Like, hey, Fatin, you're acting really weird. Or hey, Fatin, you know, you haven't left your room in a week. Like, what's going on? Don't you want to go out? It's a beautiful day. You know, there's birds outside. Go take your binoculars and go look at some birds, you know? So having people around you who know you really well and who know when something is off. I think that could be a really good way to manage it.
How did you find the people who are those rocks of support in your life?
God, you know, my family.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, my family.
Mm.
And who knows, you know, I was raised to be very spiritual, like ghosts and astrology and past lives and all kinds of stuff. So, you know, it's a real philosophical question of like, why was I born into this family? Why was I born to the parents that have become my parents? And if it's part of your spirituality to think of like, you know, multiple lives, multiple incarnations of different people or of different souls, you could say, okay, well, I could have been that bird, you know, sitting on that branch, or I could have been, you know, a Buddhist monk in Tibet, or I am Fatin, an African American woman who grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey, you know? So who
Mhm.
knows? Who knows how I found them? That's just kind of where I found myself.
Mm. Fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. You've mentioned dialectical behavioral therapy a couple times. I
Yes.
also found it very,
Yes.
very helpful. Can you share one or two skills that like specifically made a difference for you?
Yes. There are two. One is called opposite action.
Mm.
And if you think about it, whatever is coming to your mind is most likely what it is. So let's say you're depressed. Like last summer was awful. My mom and my sister know how awful it was. It was awful. I did not leave my room. I didn't leave my community. I left my room. I left the apartment, but I didn't leave my community, like my block that I lived on, for like 3 weeks. Didn't
Mm.
talk to anybody, didn't see anybody. Yeah, it was really, really bad. So my mind is like going in a million different directions. Peg, can you please remind me of the question? I want to
Oh,
be, or the audience question or your question, or because I want to be clear.
yeah, it's one or two DBT skills that were helpful.
Ah, okay. So let's say you're depressed, you're in bed, you don't want to leave your room. Opposite action is, okay, you know, get up and go outside. You've been sitting in the same spot for hours, you know, or for me, when I'm depressed, I get very quiet, I isolate myself, pick up the phone and text a friend, you know.
Mhm.
If you are, let's say, what's another example? Well, I mean, there's a million examples that I could think of, but that's basically what it is in a nutshell.
Mhm.
Also, the thing I like about DBT is that it's very evidence-based not that other modalities aren't evidence-based, but this particular one in terms of physiology and how the mind-body connection works in the brain. There's one particular skill in DBT, I think it's called TIP. And don't ask me to describe the acronym because it's, I'm not the best at thinking of different things at once. So once we shut off the interview, it'll come right to me. But for now, I'll try to describe it in the best way that I can. Part of it has to do with the sensation of cold. And anybody who's interested in this, please research this because it's fascinating. People who, you know what, I'm not gonna say his name, but people who went to Kenyon know who I'm talking about. One of our classmates has done a ton of research about like ice or ice baths or something. Anybody who knows who I'm talking about, please correct me because I might be talking crazy right now. But one of the skills of DBT is like taking a bowl of water and filling it with ice and like sticking your face in the ice water.
Right.
And I don't know the science of it, the physiology of it, but when you're like at a 10 of emotional dysregulation and you do that, it can bring you down. And we do a lot of like counting and like measuring and things in DBT. Like, how are you feeling right now? What's your anxiety? Okay, my anxiety is at a 7. All right, do a breathing exercise for 5 minutes. Okay, we're checking back in. Where's your anxiety now? My anxiety is at a 5. And some people may be like, I still feel anxious. And I was like that too. And again, it goes with perfectionism. Like, you think that people's natural state should be 0 anxiety. And guess what? That's not true. And it's not realistic. And guess what? 5 is lower than 7. 5 is a smaller number than 7. Your anxiety went down. That's all. That's all. That's all it needs to be, So
Right.
cold showers, ice baths, exercise, strenuous exercise. So not like yoga or anything, like go and like run around the block. And that brings down your emotional dysregulation.
Right. Right. I love those suggestions. I love opposite action. And I found a worksheet that I'm going to share real quick that has the steps. This was easy to find online. I just Googled opposite action worksheets.
Yeah.
You name the emotion, you check the facts. So if someone didn't wave back to me when I waved to them, could they be preoccupied? Could they not have seen me? Could they have just heard some bad news and they're just in a state? Identify your action urges, and basically you're looking at is this thing that I have the urge to do, go up and confront the person who didn't say hello to me promptly. Is it a wise thing to do? Is it really going to help me and be effective? If not, I probably don't want to do that thing. Yeah. So that was one that I heard referred to a lot, opposite action. And I was happy to finally learn what it meant in DBT.
DBT is so fascinating and has been so powerful in my life. And again, knowledge is power. So whether you're dealing with bipolar or some other mental illness, or whether, I don't know if there are any MSWs or psychotherapists or LCPCs, counselors out there watching. If you're the type of person who's into psychology, do research. Just type into Google Marcia Linehan, who was a psychologist or a psychiatrist, I forget, a mental health professional who developed DBT. And also I want to not necessarily caution is kind of a strong word, but caution people when they're doing research about DBT is that, when something gets really popular, people try to like pull out different strings of information,
Yes.
And all of the official, because DBT, let's face it, DBT is trademarked, And that's all health stuff, which is a whole other conversation. So these worksheets and books and things are not free. You know what I mean? They're not supposed to be free. So just be careful when you're Googling, because you'll put in DBT, you'll put in Marsha Linehan, and 1,000,001 hits will come up. So just use your what's the word? Media savvy skills to kind of wade through what's like the legit information and what's just, fluff.
That is an excellent point. And I see one of our chat heroes, Gary, has said DBT is very valuable for borderline personality disorder.
Yes.
It was in fact developed specifically to treat that diagnosis, but it turned out to be very helpful for anyone who struggled with emotional regulation. So that's not my diagnosis as fate would have it, but I did find it very helpful.
Yeah, and like you said, Peg, urges, people with borderline personality disorder, people who struggle with self-harm, all of that type of thing. People who have a lot of like outbursts, a lot of conflict with other people, and that's just an example of emotional dysregulation. Like if you find yourself like at an 8 or a 9 all the time, like DBT hopefully will teach you how to just bring yourself down out of the red zone, which is what my therapist and I call it. So
exactly. You got another shout out from Sharon. I've got another event. Thank you so much for sharing, Fatin. That's nice. That's wonderful. I'm going to make some general announcements while we've got a lull in our questions. Please join us next week. We're going to have another, hopefully equally fabulous guest on our show tonight. Her name is Kritzia Armbrister. She's a case manager for Veteran Services of the Carolinas in Fayetteville. She lives with post-traumatic stress and is proud to be part of a team that is serving other veterans who have a background like hers. Come and join us to learn how this Bahama native faced significant mental health stigma as a female minority service member. Very powerful story there. And she's a fabulous person to talk to. Please fill out our survey. When you leave the Zoom message, if you're on Zoom with us, a survey will magically appear, and that really helps us to improve over time, to show the state what we've done. So please fill that out. We have plenty of time. We go till 8:30 if the energy and the questions and the flow call for it. Is there anything you want to add that you want to be sure we cover, Fatin, before we get to that point?
I was just thinking of something, and I'll say it now, even though I was like, oh, I should save it until the end, but I just want everybody to know, I have a huge love-hate relationship with social media. And I really, earlier this year was like, I'm gonna erase all of my social media. And my sister, who's like my voice of reason, was like, Fatin, come on, like, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. So, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook now, which Facebook is the one that I sort of teeter on the edge of whether to stay or whether to go. But my point is, friends, family, people who know me, people who don't know me, like, please feel free to reach out with a few caveats. I'm not a therapist, okay? If you're having a crisis, call 911, okay, and get to an emergency room, please. Or dial 988, 988, everybody, okay? But for anybody who's not in crisis, whether you want to talk about mental illness, whether you want to talk about psychology, if you're an introvert and you're not sure, about all that stuff, if you want to exchange funny memes or dog videos, puppy videos, or whatever, just reach out to me, because I'll say this, I have been so incognito, for the past several months. And I just want to apologize to everybody, honestly, because I have done a horrible job of keeping in touch with people. And I just want everybody to know that I love you so much. Okay? And that's all you need to know.
That is so powerful. And I want to thank you for saying it. Partly because you're showing courage and transparency, but also every person I know who lives with a mental health condition has those eras where I'm sorry, I need to be in a cocoon. I need to take care of me.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
overstimulated. I don't
Yes.
feel well. I got nothing.
Yes.
And it takes a
Yes.
special friend, a committed friend to stick it
Yeah.
out through that.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
So
it definitely goes both ways, because I know some people are offended by curse words, so I'll use the family version, but just because you have mental illness doesn't mean you get to be a jerk,
sure.
okay? And that is like the most difficult thing for me to realize, because it's like you have symptoms, you're depressed, you don't want to leave your room. And I would get so frustrated, like, you don't understand, you don't understand me, you're not giving me what I need. But as people who, like, no man is an island, nobody lives in a vacuum, like your behavior, your symptoms, your safety, your well-being affects other people.
Right.
And just because you have bipolar, just because you've been hospitalized 3 times, you don't, this may be tough love, but it's like we don't get to ignore that. We don't get to forget that,
Mhm.
and that's been extremely difficult for me to kind of wrap my head around. But
Mhm.
everybody, mark my words. I talk about my age all the time. I'm 44, I'm middle-aged. I legit have been experiencing a midlife crisis, or what I would consider a midlife crisis. So anything that happened in the past, negative, let's leave it in the past and let's focus on the future, because I don't know about you all in Zoom land, but I'm turning over a new leaf. So please join me. Let's go this way. Or is it that way? I don't know.
I love that. Wonderful comment from Gary in the chat. Every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. And one of the women I took a meditation class would sort of be focused on really difficult things in their life or kind of stuck in a dark place. She would say, well, what you want to do with your energy is let that dissolve and focus on what you want to build. I don't know if that makes sense to people. To me, it did. And I find that really helpful because I really want to focus on the things that hurt me, that held me back, my own mistakes, my own shame.
Yeah.
But that's not where I want to live. I want to let that dissolve and I want to
Yes.
focus on that vision and moving forward.
Yes. And I would add to that, Peg, by saying, and this is something I was journaling about just a few hours ago. For me, it's more important to be moving towards something rather than away from something.
Yeah.
And part of the reason why I'm in the situation that I'm in now, with my housing, and everybody who follows me on Facebook knows exactly what I'm talking about, is because when I left my teaching job, I was running away from a bad situation, but I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a goal. I didn't have a destination. All I knew was that I wanted to get the hell away from whatever that big, scary monster was, you
Hmm.
know? And honestly, I think that was a mistake. I mean, woulda, coulda, shoulda. I don't do regret. I don't think it's a
Mhm.
helpful emotion. But yeah, I mean, you have to realize your mistakes and take responsibility for. I have to take responsibility for the things that I've done that have contributed to my life circumstances right now.
Okay. So
And just try to do better in the future and make smarter decisions.
Is it quitting the job that you regret?
That's a good question. Oh, yes, this just came to mind. And I forget who I was talking about this with. I feel like leaving my teaching job was simultaneously the best decision I could have ever made and the worst decision I ever made.
Mm,
And again, in DBT, dialectic, which as far as I know has to do with like the concept of a binary. Two things can be true at the same time. And that's a concept that a lot of people don't realize either. You can love somebody, but not like them.
right.
I mean, hello, family, you know, anybody who has a mom, a dad, a sister, a cousin, you know what I'm talking about. You can love somebody to the depths of your soul, but as a human being, in terms of their personality, you don't get along. You're completely different people.
Right.
But that's okay. Two things can be true at the same time.
Right. Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you were taking care of yourself, and it's hard to argue with the value of doing that.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, I think I'm out of questions. This was a fabulous conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. And
Yeah,
yeah, I'm definitely going to be one of those people who reaches out to you on Facebook. And
thank you.
yeah, let's keep up with one another. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Um, hmm. Give me a couple seconds. Um, do do what you love. Identify what it is that you love and do it. And be like aggressive, be angry, be like militant about making sure you carve out space for that. Because it's like what keeps you alive. It's what keeps you going. It's what keeps you balanced, you know? So any of my birding friends if anybody wants to go look for owls in Laurel on Saturday, hit me up.
All
There's an
right.
owling tour happening. Please come with me. Or you know what? I'm an introvert. I don't care. I'll go by myself. But it's always fun with friends, right?
That's right. That's right. And it's blackbirding week, so gotta love that.
Yes, yes, Blackbirders Week. Yes. Google it. And there's a big presence on Instagram too. So if you do Instagram, you'll find everything you need to know there.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Fatin.
Thank you so much, Peg. And thank you so much, everybody who tuned in. I really appreciate you, and I hope that our conversation has benefited you in some way.
Me too. If you're out there feeling alone, please give us a call at NAMI. We appreciate you and we want to hear from you. You're not alone, and you'll find out. We get it. Have a wonderful week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.